Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicating to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we are going to be talking about the 3 things every family needs to do with their tech. And to kind of give a little background on this conversation, the past few weeks, we've covered the gamut. We have talked about how to engage news online and through digital means. In light of the gospel, we've talked about gaming addiction, smartphones, and what to do with rebellious youths. So today, we're going back to trying to be really practical, very actionable. And as parents, we want answers. Yes, we want to talk about the process, of course. But at the end of the day, we want to know what we need to do right now. If my kid isn't sleeping, I don't want to talk about sleep theory, right? I don't want to get into the nitty gritty. That's all great and interesting and wonderful, but I want my kid to sleep right now, yesterday. I want to feel rested. If my kid's talking back or has a bad attitude, I don't want fuzzy facts about child development. I want concrete actions that I can take to help my child's heart. So you can imagine how it feels when a parent comes to me and says, Nathan, what should I do with tech in my family, right? They generally are asking for something very specific. And I set out to answer this because I was like, oh, this won't be that hard because there's tons of research. I've worked with kids a long time. I know a lot of families, right? We can do this. And I thought I'd done a pretty good job, but then I made a talk that I gave to families, and then I produced a podcast, and I did social media, and then the questions kept coming, right? So I got a couple who had 6 kids, and they asked me the same question of, well, what should I do with my family? And then a dad whose son was feeling isolated and depressed asked me, and then a single mom of 4 asked me right after I gave a talk with her angry eldest son sitting next to her, right? And a couple in ministry who were really hands-on parents with 4 kids asked me the same question. And a stay-at-home dad came and asked me this exact same question. And a mom of 3 very recently, right, who's in the middle of dealing with a child who has extreme anxiety and isolation, and another kid who's really unhealthy in tech asked me, and I realized oh my goodness, I can give this really broad structure, right? The Gospel Tech workshop that I give live is a really broad structure. It's kind of how do we begin this conversation to begin to understand even what is going on based on some research and based on the gospel and based on kind of general application principles. But then it gets down to, all right, but what applies across all of these families? If I'm never going to meet this person and I only get to tell them really one thing or one conversation, what would that look like? That's what this conversation is going to be today. What do I need to do with tech in my family? I may not have met you. I may not know the ins and outs of your particular family situation, but all 3 of these will apply. All 3 of these will be helpful. And all 3 of these are going to be things that we need to address as families in order to ensure that we raise healthy youth in a tech world. So with that in mind, let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Thank you to everyone who has helped make this podcast possible. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. I had a couple cool conversations this week, but when you guys listen, that's a huge encouragement because Anna and I make this content in order to encourage others and in order to remind you of the truth in the gospel or to tell you the first time. Maybe you've never heard this before, but the reason we do gospel tech is because we're passionate about seeing God change lives and change hearts. That's our passion. Tech just happens to be where we're working right now. Our passion is not technology. Our passion has been young people since the beginning. That's why Anna and I became teachers. And then out of that, stepped into nonprofit time. And we are now passionate about seeing young people reach their full potential. And we know that's only going to become possible when they are fully free to become who they are in Christ. Their hearts have to be set free. They have to be made new creations. And that's going to be an opportunity that families get to have, which is why we're talking to parents right now. So when you listen, that's amazing. When you tell your friends, that's amazing. When you review and subscribe to this podcast, that's incredible. And when you go and use the resources we made at gospeltech.net, it's an incredible encouragement to us. So thank you to everyone who is doing that. If you have not checked out gospeltech.net, go there. our podcast is there, our social media content is there, articles that we write is there, online resources is there, the Family Tech Framework workshop is there, and you can actually we're starting to give live talks in parts of the United States where live talks are a thing again. In our area, they're actually shutting down again here in Washington State. So we're actively going in reverse. But Zoom talks and those things are still kind of starting to gain traction again. I think that's really where this conversation starts to matter, because that's when families begin to see, this is something I can do. I don't just need to go send my kids someplace. Like, I can do this in-house. And that's what we're excited about. So, all right, today's conversation, we are building on this premise of what are the three things families need to do. As I mentioned in the intro, kind of this big picture of, all right, well, that can be a lot of things, right? It's huge because it's different for every family. And if someone tells me, right, that they may or may not game, if I start talking about gaming, I guess I'll tackle it that way. If I start talking about video games, they might go, well, we don't have video games, right? And if I mention social media, they might be like, well, I'd never let my kid go on social media. If we talk about shows or music, they might go, well, I'd never let my kid watch or listen to that. And that might be true, but that it's not true across the board, right? There's people in every one of those facets. And for some of those people, it's a struggle, and some of them it's not. They're in a very healthy spot. So the three things we're going to talk about today is the first thing every family needs to do is to make sure their tech is healthy. The second is going to be putting tech in public places. And the third is going to be, what does it look like to make a family tech framework? Okay. We need to get on the same page. And if every family did those three, we would be headed in a very different technological direction. And I will argue, actually, that not only would we have healthier hearts and minds, we would actually be driving and steering the tech market in a different direction, because much of the tech market right now is in response to our consumer behaviors. I don't believe that should be our first goal, because I think it's a poor motivation. And I think it can be circumvented through really good technology design. We can be convinced we need stuff we don't want. So I don't think that should be our motivation, but I do want to recognize that in a consumer culture, consumers are technically driving the market, even if we're sometimes being tricked into buying things that we never even wanted. So let's start at the beginning then, because I will digress rapidly in this conversation. Let's make sure our tech is healthy. Two parts on this. The first thing you got to do is know your tool tech and your drool tech, okay? It's easy for us sometimes to convince ourselves that drool tech is a tool. If you're not familiar with this conversation, the premise, you can go to gospeltech.net. It's on the very first page. Actually, it's on the About page. So go to the About page. But idea is this: tool tech helps you build stuff, helps you create. Drool tech helps you consume stuff. The only reason we really care about that differentiation is they're designed differently. So tool tech operates as fast as I operate because I'm the one making it happen. It always is an extension of my efforts. So a hammer is a tool, a nail gun is a tool, a computer can be a tool until it's not, because it changes from being a tool. Right now it's a tool. I'm recording on a computer that allows me to put my voice on the internet, that allows you to consume it without us ever having to make time and schedule a meeting, right? That's really neat. That's a tool. It's leveraging my ability to speak about the subject. It becomes drool tech when I start consuming content, right? It can happen faster than the pace of real life, so it can get overstimulated, and much of that content is actually designed with kind of rewards built in, right? There's behavioral design as a part of that, whether that's variable rewards or interval rewards, and it has to do with the timing of it, or if it's just the social aspects and that fear of missing out, right? The like button and the infinite scroll and that just reward process that is built in to encourage me to come back or to stay longer, right? So that is tool and drool tech. I can convince myself that my tool tech or my drool tech is tool tech if I'm not careful. In fact, I have to use social media for my current job, right? That's one of the major ways we reach people. But it can very quickly turn from, well, I'm doing this for work, to I am completely distracted, right? The line is wafer thin, to the point where I have been trying to keep social media going and creating content for that and doing a lot of the writing for that. And it's just been eating up time because I'm so easily distractible, because that little red button, just autopilot, makes me click on it. I don't even have the space to have the moral struggle on like, yeah, but I was doing this other thing. Like, I'm just doing it, and all of a sudden it was 4 minutes gone, 8 minutes gone, 12 minutes gone, right? And it's never 3 hours at a time, but it's these little pieces and then the mental effort of having to pull my brain back and focus again. But I was convinced like, well, I have to do this, right? This is how I'm letting people know about what we're doing. This is right? We're trying to let people hear the gospel and encourage them in this process. Like, obviously social media is going to be a demand of that. And yet it wasn't, right? Like I had to go and be like, all right, but what part of this is tool tech and what part of this is drool tech? What part of this can we make more productive and what part can we not? And so that's really important to know. We'll come back to like what we actually ended up doing about that, but you need to assess your tool and drool tech. Ask yourself, does this help me create or does this help me consume? And a great spot to start is your smartphone. So I would actually go to settings. This will be in the show notes, but go to settings, like the little gear looking thing somewhere on your iPhone. And go to screen time. And what you're going to see right there is your daily average time use. So on your phone, it will literally tell you on an average day, there's a little line across the middle of the week, and it'll show this is roughly how many hours. And then it'll show you each day of the week. This is where you were above and below. And then for today. Then in that, you can go down towards the bottom, click See All Activity. And you're actually going to see your time broken into categories. Like it'll break it into social, what social apps did you use, for how long, entertainment, and then creativity. But you're also going to see your time used per app. This is basically as far as you need to go to know your tool and drool tech, because you're going to be able to see right here, how much time am I using in a day? And on what apps. But really cool, if you want to really deep dive, scroll down from that. So you're still under See All Activity, but you just kind of go to the second page of it by scrolling down. And it'll actually tell you what the first app you use each time you pick up your phone and how many times you pick up your phone on average. Okay, the average American picks up their phone 80 times a day, right? So that's unlocking your phone. You get into your phone 80 times a day. It'll tell you how many times a day on average, what times of day you did it. So on the one that I'll actually be posting, that I used mine from yesterday, the first time I checked my phone was before 5 a.m., which is startling, okay? But it'll tell you that when you picked it up, what the first app you went to was, and then how long you stayed on. So what you can then know is, what am I actually doing on my device? And then it'll be like, all right, well, why am I going to my device and when am I going to my device? Which is really cool. So you now know what you use it for, when you use it, and how long you use it. And I guess the real point is here is just asking ourselves, does any part of this surprise me? Right? Does it make sense? Or do I feel like I need to make excuses? I immediately start to try to justify why I need this one thing or another. I mentioned I picked my phone up for the first time yesterday before 5 a.m., which is startling because that means I went to check my phone before I left for exercise. No one in my family's up. I'm not up doing work. I'm getting out to exercise. And there's a clock in my kitchen, right? So what was my motivation for checking my phone? Like, if I had to guess, like, I honestly don't remember. It must have been some kind of autopilot thing. But if I had to guess, I was hoping for something exciting, right? It's a little spice at my 4 a.m. wake up. I wasn't there to read my Bible. I've got one of those in my kitchen, very close to my clock, right? I wasn't there to message someone that I had to let know before I arrived at workout. Like, I probably was looking to see if someone sent me an exciting text. And it's easy to make excuses to do that, right? Our job then is to do the hard work of assessing our tech, and it's binary. It's 1, tool tech, or 2, drool tech. That is not good or bad. But again, the research showing us that the overstimulating reward designed technology is much more invasive than we would naturally fall to believe is really important. And I would like to point out here, the only reason screen time even exists on a smartphone or specifically iPhones is because of investor and purchaser pushback. People started saying, Apple, we want more accountability. We want more control over what we're using, when we're using it, and to know that information. Previously, there was no way to know what apps you were using, how long you were using it for, any of that information. This was specifically because of consumer pushback, right? And they spent a ton of money to make a really high quality screen time product that we can now make use of and know this. So keep that in mind when we talk about what is the end result of heart change when it ties in with technology. Well, a demand for tech change, right? We quit being okay with unhealthy design and even lazy design that hurts the consumers or even drives products in an unhealthy way. So We begin to focus on ethical product design, which is cool, not the end goal of itself, but a cool outcome. It's a cool fruit of having changed hearts. And when, that's why we're gospel tech, right? That's why we focus on the gospel and make sure that that's how we're using our technology. So we then have assessed our tool and drool. I know how much I'm using, when I'm using it, and why I'm using it, probably after a little self-reflection. Then we got to make sure that our tech is healthy, right? So in addition to me getting sucked into social media, right, I got tied into this fear of missing out. This was nuts for me. But I started looking at my social media use. We did not start Gospel Tech or even the nonprofit Flint 9 with the goal of building a platform. That wasn't our goal. We wanted just a way to share with people what we're doing. And that our passion drove us to serving kids and therefore serving families, right? That was why we started Gospel Tech. And the gospel at the center of it all, because we very quickly realized if we just keep giving positivity talks, there's some really good groups doing actually very solid talks out there about choices and changing and all that. Character Strong, shout out. If you guys want to check them out, they're amazing. If your kids are going to school, check out Character Strong. It's basically how do you have integrity in everyday life and build a school culture around that, right? It's very biblically based, but not like it's still in public school. So there's not Bible verses attached to it. I have no reason to do that. Character Strong does an amazing job. So what are we passionate about then? Well, we want to see kids' hearts changing. So we need the gospel as part of this. And we started doing that. Well, social media comes in. I'm using it as a tool. I'm using it as a tool. Now I'm 2 years into using it as a tool. And all of a sudden, like I'm looking at the data use and statistics, and I'm either feeling good or bad about my day based on what that number tells me. Think about that. Like I know what's happening like in the back of my mind. I've read the research. I've watched the documentaries. Like I've done the stuff, right? I've talked to the programmers and the behavioral psychologists. Like I'm aware of what's being done to my brain, and yet it's impacting my attitude. It's impacting the way I'm going about my job. I'm starting to spend more time thinking about, well, what if we tweak this or change that or went this place, right? Like I'm trying to kind of fiddle with the numbers. Like that's not the goal. Like the goal is if God tells me to go and speak this and 3 people listen, like those are the 3 people that I needed to reach. Like the goal is not how can I make this thing shinier so more people can want to do it. The goal is how do I faithfully and consistently share the gospel and encourage people who need to be encouraged in this season, right? And more people may come and listen, and that'll be fine. But that is not my goal. I will not have a good day just because more people listen, or a bad day because fewer people listen. Like that's not the litmus I'm using. And yet I was to the point where I actually had to give Anna control of the social media. I'll do writing and I'll create content, and then she's running basically like the posting of it. So I'm not distracted. And so I'm not looking at the data and analytics on the daily. I still will check in on it because I do want to make sure that we're effectively reaching the people we're trying to reach, right? Like there is a group of people out there and there's a particular format that it's expected to be conveyed in, right? Especially on Instagram and Facebook. Like there's a way to communicate with people you're trying to reach. I'm not saying don't care at all about people out there. You're trying to reach people out there. There are correct and incorrect ways to do that. Yet it was affecting my heart. So I had to check my tech health. And the way we do that, right? The whole reason for that story is say we do what we call a reset. So you go, all right, I know my tool and drool tech use. I've kind of done the 1-2, 1-2. I know what's tool, what's drool. Does it impact my relationships and responsibilities? Does it impact my enjoyment, my sleep, my emotions, and my time, right? And when I look at my, just if you looked at my social media use, and I would have said, that's tool tech. It's specifically for work. I don't even have a personal like Instagram account. I don't post to my personal Facebook account. I've had that thing for almost a decade, but I don't use it personally, right? I'm not scrolling through people's feeds. I'm specifically using it as just a megaphone. How do we let people know what we're doing out here? So that's tool tech, right? But then I go, well, does it impact my relationships, responsibilities? No, except the responsibilities part. When I get distracted on social media, or if I get super bummed out and I'm walling around in self-pity, staring at my belly button, like I probably am not keeping up on my responsibilities. Literally, as a nonprofit, right? People have donated money. They are prayerfully supporting us, and they are asking us to continue to do this mission that God's given us. And if I'm getting distracted, like, well, no, I'm not being faithful with my responsibilities. And then we go to enjoyment. Like, well, I'm definitely not being faithful with my enjoyment, right? Like, I love talking to people. I love making this content, But it's impacting me if I have a bunch of fear of missing out. If I start second and third and fourth guessing everything that I'm doing about like, well, but maybe I'm missing this other opportunity. You start to hear footsteps and you start to get nervous and you start to get really paranoid and trying to like overthink everything to the point where now nothing you make is good or has energy because you're so worried about doing it so that people will like it, doing it to get a response. And if you do get that response, now you feel good. And if you don't get that response, you feel twice as bad. Like, that's not good. My sleep was definitely impacted by that. Because I'm not sleeping well at night or I'm waking up at 2 a.m. sweating. My emotions are definitely affected. And my time, I didn't really like, but I mean, time affects my responsibilities. But there was no massive time. Like you would look at my time use if you went to my screen time and be like, oh, it's not that bad. But I'm 4 out of the 5 on a reset. Think about that. This is something that I thought was tool tech, something that was actually helping my work. And when I actually assess what I'm doing on it and then look at a reset, I recognize I'm a 4 out of 5. I'm 80% unhealthy on this behavior. And that is really what we have to do. So this is why this is something that every family can do. Every family can look at their tech and say, all right, where's our tool and rule? There's some great tools out there. You can even purchase some additional ones that we'll talk about a little later. But using things like screen time or there's accountability and my goodness, I don't remember what it's called, but even on most of the consoles, there's some parent support resources that'll tell you use and time of use, et cetera. But I was a 4 out of 5. I then had to enact some change. So that's what all of us can do very easily. You can do that today. We can assess what type of tech we're using and whether that tech is healthy. The second thing we can do is we can make sure our tech is in public places. This is whether or not your tech is healthy. You could be a 0 out of 5 on a reset, which means you're really good. 0 out of 5 means you have 0 issues. Right? A 1 out of 5 means there's at least one thing unhealthy about that tech when it comes to your relationships and responsibilities, your enjoyment, your sleep, your emotions, and your time. Okay, so that's 1 out of 5 would be, I'm a 4 out of 5. So I was not great at all on mine. But even if I had been a 0 out of 5, my tech still needs to be in public places. This is laptops, PCs, gaming devices, whether those are handheld devices or consoles, smartphones, tablets, basically anything with dual tech capabilities needs to be in a public place. And really there's 2 reasons. First is going to be to remove the distraction potential. And the second is to remove the danger potential. All right, so tech in public places means for your family, the second thing you can do, no matter where you're at in your tech journey, if your kid is 5, your kid is 15, you got to get your tech into public places. Our devices are designed to distract even when we have good attention. Wow. Let me try that again. Our devices are designed to distract even when we have good intentions. Just having a phone nearby is a distraction. Okay. So brain drain, the mere presence of one smartphone reduces available cognitive capacity was written by Ward et al. In 2017. It's a research piece showing that just having a phone near you, right? Having a phone even off but visible is still a distraction to you because you're having to buffer the desire to go check that phone. There's so many little behavioral triggers tied in with just seeing your phone, right? You start thinking about the app and then about the people you connect with that app and then the activities you do with the people that connect with that app, right? And it builds on itself and it snowballs to the point where maybe I'm just trying to write an article or record a podcast or do my homework or listen. Like I'm just trying to do something and I can't because that thing is tapping me in the back of my brain, giving me this nearly irresistible urge just to check this one thing. It'll just be that one, right? And that is the beauty and the behavioral design behind most of these products is they can get you in there just for that one thing. Your screen time, right? Will tell you what you went there for, but it'll also tell you why you stayed there, right? Because if all you did was go and check that one text message, you'll see that. But there's a good chance that your average daily use is higher than, like it's 55 checks a day, right? So I'm probably not on there 55 seconds. I didn't just check that one text. I would check that one text and then that one news article and then that one video and then that one message and then that one app, right? And all of a sudden it's been 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, however long, and I haven't done what I had set out to do. In fact, I might have forgotten some of it and go about my day until someone else reminds me. So we know that it's a distraction. We see the research. I'll put the Ward et al. Link in the show notes. If we know this is the case, and science is continually proving that it not only happens, but it's designed to happen, why would we leave these devices in areas, specifically in our rooms, that are set aside for rest, focus, and restoration, right? The device is the complete opposite of those activities. So instead, we should be filling our rooms with what we need to reset, to be restored, so that when we go to our work or to our play, we can do that well. We can be fully present, right? There's definitely a bigger conversation on what a room space should be, but tech needs to be in in public places, out of private places, and bedrooms are typically where we have one of those private places that kind of slips under the radar. So take all drool tech out of those rooms, or anything that has drool tech capabilities, basically. So that's the distraction potential piece. The second one is the danger potential. So the more time our children spend online, the more likely they are to be bullied. They're more likely they are to experience overstimulation, just from flashing lights and games and social media and music even, that it operates so much faster than real life, and to see pornography or to encounter dangerous strangers. Basically, there's a host of research showing that there's a lot of pitfalls to private tech locations, especially the places where we sleep, because as soon as you get into disrupted sleep, if you read Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep, it's a wonderful book walking through the importance, especially in developing brains, but even in fully developed adults, why we need uninterrupted, restful sleep. And many of us have trained ourselves opposite of that. We have trained ourselves to be highly stimulated up to the point we lay in bed. We toss and turn until we fall into a disrupted sleep. And then many of us are waking up because our phone lights up, or because we remember that thing, or we make a note, or research that thing, or whatever. And we need to train ourselves otherwise. We need to train ourselves to get that good rest. Now, this doesn't mean your kid can't have tech, but it does mean it needs to be in a public space. Okay. And so we're talking about, how do you determine where those spaces are, when those devices can be used, because that's important, right? The time and the space are related, and that's going to be part of being healthy with it. But putting a little effort into it now is going to be a lot more beneficial than putting a lot of effort into trying to find solutions to negative tech outcomes later. So let's walk out specifically what this looks like. So the first thing I would say is, as soon as people come home, devices with cell reception go away, right? So if there is an individual with a smartphone, if they have a tablet that has cell service, those devices go away, and your family needs to set up Wi-Fi for your family. You need to get Wi-Fi and potentially a device like a Circle that allows a higher level of accountability over those devices. And then those things need to be in public areas. And that's really twofold. One, it stops kind of the I'm going to check my phone whenever I feel like it thing. So it's just good behavioral training for all of us, adults, this is us included. We need our phones during the workday. When the workday's done, we toss it in whatever location your family decides. We keep ours in a drawer, right? So that when I'm walking by the counter, I don't just see it sitting there and go, well, my kid's playing in the other room. I could just check it real quick, right? Because it's, again, that's delaying gratification, and that is going to be important just for our personal well-being and our ability to complete whole thoughts even. So we've done that, but let's say your kid comes home, they've got a smartphone, they enter the house, what do they do with it, right? We need a plan for that, because without a plan, they're going to take it, they're going to end up in their room, and they're going to end up distracted on it or isolated with it, and into any number of things, even if they're really good kids, as we like to say about our children. Anyway, I think we could take umbrage with the term good kids, but even if they are high integrity, accountable kids with low interest in anything that could cause any real emotional or emotional, psychological danger, that smartphone can be an accidental distraction. So we give up that smartphone. And if I want to be on social media, if I want to engage my friends, if I want to engage just content that I like, play a game, that can be done on a family device, right? A public computer, a public console, set in a public space. Same thing. So then that's, again, with video games, there's a time and a place. It's designated by the family. The games are going to be put in a public area. And this is because even the best intentioned gamers can run into issues when playing, either because of personal health issues or because of outside influences or individuals. And so that keeps the game conversation open. The practices are open, and it allows us to keep the time and the content accountable as well. As maybe your kid wants to learn to code, maybe they want to make music, maybe they want to be a video, either like director, creator, or they want to make video content, like become like a YouTuber. That's fine. That can all be done off a public device, right? So we are saying that there is no reason to have private devices. I understand. So then the question that comes this way, well, what about school devices? Right? Which maybe you've been asking since we said this. All right, that's all well and good, Nathan. But what about school devices? School, you can do that with headphones. So I know a family, 5 kids, 4 of them in online school, and they literally have school in like basically the living room, and they have their personal workspace. They have their headphones on, and they do school. And then at the end of school, the device gets turned in. Okay, so this becomes now this is a family device, right? It goes back to the parents, and if they want to connect with their friends or do their activities, it can be used as a family device in a public space. You might say, well, that's just not preferable because their game has annoying sound or they want to be able to talk. Like those are things your family is going to need to be able to talk through, because I understand that there's nuance to this conversation, but the point is your nuanced conversation cannot say, well, we're going to take these unhealthy, high-risk opportunities in order for convenience to take priority, right? That's not what we're doing. Priority is we're going to keep our tech in public spaces. Priority is going to be we're going to make sure we know our tool and our drool tech, and we keep it in a healthy reset bandwidth, right? And we remove those things that aren't healthy. So the getting rid of annoying sound or gaining certain opportunities is not going to trump this concept of having healthy tech and keeping it public, right? Keeping it accountable both for the time used and the content, which brings us to the family tech framework. So the third thing every family can do is make a family tech framework. It's how you lead your family in the process. We've actually made an online workshop that helps do this. You could do it in just a couple days. Like you could do it over a weekend if you wanted, or you could take your time and do it over a couple weeks, but it leads you through this entire process. If when you're listening to me, you heard that idea of tool and drool tech and reset, and if you felt overwhelmed at all, or you thought about the conversations that are going to have to happen with public tech, like you have a rhythm with your middle school or high school students, and you know that there is going to be a small scale riot or a full-on mutiny in your home when this gets brought up, I would actually say 2 things. The first is prayerfully walk into that. There's a really good chance it's not as bad as you think. The number of families that I've worked with, they go, you know what? Like they were really upset when they heard about it, and they were upset the first day or 2, and then they started to recognize like this shift, right? They didn't feel as owned, or this stuff didn't feel as important, or they didn't feel the emotional urgency of middle school drama occurring online when they weren't there. But even if it's not, the point isn't how to get the quickest result out of your kids. The point is how to love them well in light of the gospel, acknowledging that your kid is a sinner who needs a changed heart, who needs to put their faith in Christ so they can recognize both that they're going to be made into a new creation, right? That's the heart change is a huge part. And then that in light of that new creation, they have good works they need to do, right? The point of the technology isn't get them to use technology, right? The point of the technology is if we can see on a reset that it is harmful, or that we have bad practices that can open them and expose them to damaging who they are, the best thing we can do is connect them with their identity in Christ, right? That is the best thing we do. Love them in light of the love that God has for us. So even when they are rebellious, we talked about this with tech prodigals, right? We're going to continue pursuing them in love. We're going to make it hard to make bad choices. We're going to make it easy to repent. And we're going to remind them and speak life into them because they are our children who we love. They are our first mission field. So that is what we're doing first and foremost with a family tech framework. We are not establishing rules to try to make our kids good. Your kids are not a problem to fix. First of all, you can't, right? If you think that it's your job to make your kid good, you just officially made yourself God. You're going to need to repent of that. It's heading very bad places very quickly. And second of all, it's actually this wonderful, loving journey where you get to recognize God's father heart for you as you love your kids, right? And recognize what their sins are doing to them, and you're watching it happen, and yet you still are going to love them in it, and you're going to lead them towards repentance, and you're going to trust that God loves your kid more than you do. So then the first thing we're going to do is, all right, in light of the gospel, it's going to help us determine right and wrong, right? That the gospel is going to show us, all right, is this helping us love God more, or is it distracting us from love God? I think that's a really nice binary piece that's going to at least whittle out some of the content that we're consuming, some of the behaviors we have, and it's going to be really highly personal because for me, there are things I can't do. I've mentioned before, there are video games I can't play, right? Well, That would be all of them. I don't play video games, and it's not content specific for me. It's Nathan's brain and heart specific, because even if I'm not playing the game, I'm thinking about it, and it is crushing my ability to feel joy in other things and my ability to feel excited about other things, my ability to focus on other things, because I'm always thinking about how I can get back to it, right? And it's been almost, we're coming up on 10 years, I think, since I've played a video game. And for me, it's as real as the first week when I quit. It is bizarre, okay? So that's me on a personal level. I'm not even going to say there's another person in existence that has that. Maybe there is. But that isn't the point. The point is I had to recognize that prayerfully based on what's right and wrong. We read Philippians 4:8. I bring this one up a lot because I love it when I look at my own content, and I want you to feel that same love. This is not a should thing, right? It's a reminder of, look at how beautiful God is. Everything starts to pale when we remember that well, right? Finally, brothers, Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable. If there's anything that's excellent, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I love going through what am I watching in my evenings? What am I reading? What am I listening to, both podcast-wise? What am I listening to on the radio? What am I listening for music? Are these things true and honorable and just and pure and lovely and commendable and excellent and praiseworthy? Okay. If they are, that's awesome. If they're not, I can drop that knowing that there's something better out there. There's something that's going to be, I think there's something there's more than 400,000 podcasts right now that are live. So if the podcast I'm listening doesn't build up these things in me and doesn't help me recognize more of God's goodness, greatness, glory, all right, I can pick something else to listen to. So just think about that, right? We can apply that not just to our podcast, but to the shows we watch, to the music we listen to the games we play. And so it's going to help us. I'm getting ahead of myself. The first thing is it helps us determine right and wrong, right? And so we have this idea that the Bible is going to show us truth and that God is our highest truth, and we want to know more of God and get rid of anything that distracts us from him, right? Sin is putting our hope in anything that isn't God, looking for joy in anything that isn't God. So Philippians 4:8 is a great litmus. There's other wonderful verses that do that, but Jesus basically says if there's anything that causes you to sin, cut it off and gouge it out. So we have this firm foundation in our family tech framework, right, with the gospel. We now know what the gospel is, and we understand kind of how that applies using the truths of Scripture to reflect and say, does this technology help me or hinder me in this way? And then we take that and we go, all right, what does that then firm foundation look like in terms of our tech use, right, with the time and with our location and with the content we consume, which I referenced briefly above, but with the priority of our activities, right? What are we making time for? Are we just kind of going with what's most convenient? Because I will tell you, tech is designed to be convenient, right? The idea is it removes perceived pinch points in our lives. And for some reason, we just absolutely love getting rid of all of the pinch points to the point where I can get annoyed if my 2-day Amazon delivery shows up a day late. It's a third day, right? That is an example of just how massaged my life has become to the point where I can feel upset or any kind of angst about a delayed Amazon delivery. But I do. My AA batteries haven't arrived, and I'm like, what? Where is it? What is happening in my life? So we got to make sure we schedule priorities and activities, and we set for ourselves what is going to be the most important. And the last one is safety. Okay, so if you're thinking about, man, that seems like a lot to make a family tech framework, that is why we made that online resource. So gospeltech.net/resources, and what you're going to find is the first half helps you have the tech conversation. It walks you through tool and rule tech. It walks through how do we connect the gospel? Why do we even connect the gospel? Because that's a question a lot of young people have is, listen, my technology use and my faith in God are basically different things. We just need to come to, you're just trying to force this conversation and really helping your kid talk through, because that's actually a common belief we'll go into adulthood with, right? We will honestly believe, I believe in God, and as long as I do that, whatever I do next is just an extension of that. And that's simply not true. There are spiritual disciplines. We have to train our hearts in faith, right? Doubt isn't a lack of information. Doubt is a choice, right? Doubt is something I'm choosing to doubt. It's what Eve did in the garden. She heard God's explanation from Adam, right? She knew right and wrong when the snake came and asked this kind of tricky question, right? She wasn't lost. It says she ate the apple because she saw that it was going to be good for food and that it was nice to look at and it was useful for gaining wisdom. And she made a choice. She chose to doubt. The reason I bring that up is what a family tech framework helps us to do with our technology is address our choices of doubt, not just our places of ignorance, right? Where we're like, man, I made a mistake because I just didn't know, right? We just didn't have the accountability. We just didn't know that this was bad for our brains or bad for our sleep or bad for our development or designed to be addictive or any of those things. Like we didn't know, we were ignorant. And then we get to a spot where you go, yeah, but I don't know that I care, right? That's what a family tech framework helps us with. So the first half of the online workshop will help you kind of set up the groundwork so you can talk to your kids about it. And even if they disagree with you where you're coming from, they're like, listen, that's not my faith. I don't have these standards, which is heartbreaking as a parent, but it's going to happen. If your kid is over the age of, I don't know, 8, like they start asking some really big questions. And by the time they're 12, they're making those decisions, right? And you're going to keep pressing them and asking them and engaging them and having these conversations and pointing them back to the spot where they go, all right, well, I have doubt in this. And you're like, okay. Now you got a question about, is that doubt you're picking or is it actually like questions you've got? Because there is a difference, and help them actively question their faith and actively seek answers in prayer and in scripture and in conversation, because there is a living God who is speaking to them daily, who will encourage them and remind them to the point where even when their knowledge fails and they don't know the right answers, they know the God who loves them, and that's going to carry them through those dark and hard seasons. So we want that for them. And then the second part of the online workshop is going to be the actual brass tacks. Like, all right, how do we decide how much time you get with what technologies on what days for how long, right? Like that's where you have to eventually get, like you have to know, is a half hour every day too much or too little, right? On what technologies? On social media, on music, on video games, on streaming services. When are you going to be doing that? Whenever you feel like it, in wherever you feel like it, right? Like what content is going to be, like all of that matters. It's there in the family tech framework, or you're welcome to just do it based on what I told you. If you as a family work out, how does the gospel connect to our tech? What do we mean when we say the gospel, right? Make sure you write a line down, maybe 2 lines, and then time, location, content, priority of activities, and safety. You're going to be fine, okay? If you feel like you need help with that, that's why we made that online workshop. But really, like in wrapping this up, when we talk about what do families need to do with technology, every family needs to do those 3 things, right? Every family needs to make sure their tech is healthy and even know what they mean when they're talking about tech. They need to be able to put their tech in public places, and every family would benefit from a family tech framework, because that's really how we're going to fight for our families, right? How we're going to intentionally pursue our children and not just have these knockdown, drag out tech fights. So challenge for this week. Here's the application piece. This week, would you check your tech use, assess when, where, and how much digital tech you're consuming in a week? Maybe just start with your smartphone. Maybe make it just a portion of your tech. Maybe don't try to do the big picture. But if you're ready for the big picture, like start on just a piece of scratch paper or in your notes on your phone. Like, when do I use technology? When I wake up in the morning, what's the first piece of tech I use? And then go through and just mark them with a T or a D or a 1 or a 2, like whatever you want to say, is that tool tech or drool tech? Then, so that's the first thing you're going to do is assess your tech. And also, to do that. Then get all the tech out of your rooms. So I'm not even telling you to assess your tech health yet, but check what tech you're using and get it out of your rooms, and then start that conversation with your family, right? At some point this week, maybe at dinner, maybe on a car ride, ask your kids if they're aware of maybe the different types of tech, right? That can be a really valuable conversation for you as a family to have, and for your kids to start thinking about, because a lot of times kids hear tech and they just think ubiquitous technology. It's just all technology. If it plugs into a wall, if it has a screen, it is technology. And we really want to make more nuance there so that we can be more healthy, we can be more intentional. So I hope that this conversation is helpful to you and your family. I hope that it's encouraging because it gives you words to say and kind of that first step towards your kids. I know a lot of parents, it can be very intimidating to have these conversations, especially if your kid is really over the age of 6 and very attracted to their technology. It can feel very personal and you can get a lot of adverse emotional reactions because sometimes they're unhealthy and they're overstimulated. You're going to see that on a reset, right? Like, man, if you don't get your iPad time, like you go nuts on me. I'm going to put a check mark next to this to remind me, like that's an emotional piece, right? Or it's affecting your enjoyment, or it's right. We need, it's affecting our relationship. So we're already at a 3 out of 5 on that. So it gives us those steps where now we're not being combative and we're saying, I love you. And because I see this as an issue, we're going to address it. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan@gospeltech.net. You can go to gospeltech.net and find other podcasts. You can find other articles and resources we're posting, and just generally a great introduction to what Gospel Tech is if you want to know more about us and kind of how we got to doing what we're doing and where we're hoping to go next. And if you would like to join us on this, we pray that you would pray about the opportunity, but we are asking people to join us on mission. And so you can go patreon.com/gospeltech, and you would be able to join us financially. And it can be as little as a couple bucks a month, and it can go up from there. But the idea there is joining us on this mission and allowing this mission to continue to reach more families. So if you'd like to do that, please pray that out and pray about joining us on this journey. And that's it. If you have any, and you can find us on social media at Love God Use Tech. With that in mind, thank you for being here in this conversation. I look forward to talking with you guys next week as we continue to work together and pray together about how we can raise families who love God and use tech.